following is a live copyrighted presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time now for RadioLawTalk.com with your host, Frederick Penny, attorney at law. And now, RadioLawTalk.com.
We're back to RadioLawTalk.com. I'm Frederick Penny, your host, with my co-host Denise Dirks and Todd Cunin. We are missing our illustrious producer Cal Hunter and other co-host, friend, colleague, the Prince of Harvard, Chris Rodriguez. We have our friend Seth Madden in the back, as our call screener, and Brad and Jeff Smith helping us behind the board. Well, we've been talking a lot about all kinds of things. This hour, we're going to talk about Mel B, her divorce, the San Francisco murder case of what? Kate Steinley's her name? What's her name?
Kate Steinley.
Kate Steinley?
Yes.
We're going to talk about Katy Perry and the nuns. That's a very interesting one as to the lawsuit between the Archdiocese and some nuns and Katy Perry and the sale of a property in the Southern California for $14.5 million. We're going to discuss that. It's actually...
Wait, was it only $14.5 million?
14.5.
Yes.
It's got beautiful views, too.
I wonder if they'll take a post-dated out-of-state two-party check.
They probably will, because
No?
you know what? Here's the deal. I guess Katy Perry wants to move in on this property. It's called Los Feliz Convent. So apparently it's got beautiful views of
Katy Perry wants to live in a convent.
That's exactly right. So, and the reason actually there's this fight is because the nuns who lived there, the Archdiocese was attempting to sell this to Katy Perry, and the nuns basically didn't like it, did they, Denise? They were unhappy because they saw Katy Perry's videos and thought it was inappropriate that she basically bought this property. So they went ahead and sold it to someone else, and there's the fight. We're going to go into all those details in the fight. I'm going to try to drag that out, as weird as it sounds, I'm going to try to drag that out to third hour, because that's kind of a fun one to talk about. We have a number of other radio stations that pop up the third hour on our broadcast here. But we like to thank the mothership, we call it, Crack Radio and KBLF Radio out of Redding and Red Bluff. They are our mother station that has started our radio talk show of Radio Law Talk, and we thank them very much. The listeners up there are the originals. Thank you very much. And we like to thank the Amargosa Valley for putting up with Chris Rodriguez 2 weeks ago and listening to him whine like a pig about a swine, about no one listening to us in the Amargosa
Can
Valley.
I just tell you how much I love the Amargosa Valley?
Tell me how much.
I wasn't here to be on the balance on the other side of the teeter-totter that was Chris Rodriguez, as he usually sat to my left, but is going to sit to my right now. Had I been here as he was talking about the Amargosa Valley, I would have gladly put up the $20. And I want to say that I am not saying this in any effort to suck up to or brown nose the host of this program, but Fred, you were in the right.
Of course I am.
You were in the right.
Denise was with me. We were.
Yeah.
It was us.
Yeah, we were like, we're on.
We were on. We were both on him, and we were on him like a cheap suit. I'm telling you right now.
Right. He's like, even told us, oh, darn, I forgot my checkbook. It's not even in my car.
It's like what?
How convenient.
He even opened his wallet. There's like $2 in his wallet. Here's a guy. He must charge $1,000 an hour. This guy is a high-priced lawyer, and he had nothing in his freaking wallet. I just can't believe that. So tell us how they can get in touch with us, Denise.
You guys can call us at 1-855-529-7234. That's 855 Law Radio, or you can tweet us at Radio Law Talk.
Yeah, and we do have a website, www.radiolawtalk.com. You can listen live on the radio show, and we like to thank those listeners. We are booming. It was going up. We like to thank 1380 Sacramento that is picking us up starting next week live for all 3 hours, 9 to noon California time. We are going to be live on 1380 Talk Radio.
We could even be like if you think about it, because we're on Saturdays, we could do a promo that's a lot like those car shows or the monster trucks. Saturday, Radio Law Talk from 9 to noon, only on 1380.
That's exactly. Well, actually, I did
That'd
do
be
promos,
fun.
and they're going to start running on Monday. So welcome 1380 next week. And my gosh, apparently I didn't know. I guess we're in Dallas area too, because we got a call or a tweet from someone out of Dallas that was listening to us on Talk
And
3.
Minneapolis.
Talk 360 in Texas was listening to us. So, hey, hang on. If you want to be part of Radio Law Talk, we are now C-class movie stars.
We're on the C list.
We're moving to the B movie stars. All right, let's talk about Mel B. Tell me about Mel B. Well, give a background about what we've talked about in the past about Mel B. Denise.
Yeah, Mel B. She and her husband Belafonte, they're getting divorced. They had a nanny.
Who is Mel B, by the way?
Mel
a lot
B
of people don't know.
Is she's Scary Spice from the Spice Girls, and she's also currently a judge on America's Got Talent.
Okay, Spice Girls, perfect for talk.
Yeah, and she's an A-lister. You would have to say she's an A-lister.
So she won't come on our show then.
Despite the name being Mel B, she's an A-lister. It should be Mel A. Mel B. Never mind. It's just
Keep going.
It's bad pun day here.
Yeah.
BPD, bad fun day. Keep going.
So anyway, she filed for divorce against her husband, and she alleged that he had an affair with the nanny, and that the nanny had become pregnant, and that the nanny had an abortion, and her husband paid £300,000, I believe it was, to have her do so. And she also sought restraining orders against both her husband and against the nanny, because the nanny had taken some items out of a storage unit that were Mel B's separate property, and even some community property. That was what was alleged. And then it was alleged that that Mr. Belafonte had Stephen Belafonte.
Yeah, okay. Daylight come and...
Yeah.
Never.
So that it
We're
was
getting
alleged...
phone calls. Let's repeat that. It was not Harry.
No, it was Stephen, and that he was violent against her. So the temporary orders were granted, and even Mr. Belafonte got one against Mel B. So all these, domestic violence are in temporary kind of form, and the trial is coming up. So what happens is that Mel B and Stephen Belafonte decided to settle, and they agreed to custody of and they're going to share custody of their daughter. They only have one daughter together. They all agreed to drop the domestic violence restraining orders, because going through that trial was going to be extremely embarrassing, because it involved allegations of sex tapes and using sex tapes to try to extort money, that type of stuff.
Something that we're going to do against the people who are missing, Chris, and we're going to do it also with.
So she's paying
We're going to do something.
£3 million over the next three. Mel B is paying £3 million over the next 3 years to make this go away, and then Mr. Belafonte gets half of the value of the proceeds of their home, and that's how they're getting involved. He also gets spousal support over a period of time from her.
He does.
Man. Even though he's a producer on his own right, but she's clearly makes a lot more money.
Yeah.
So with all that said, the only thing that's left, the defamation suit by the nanny against Mel B, that is still coming up for trial.
So what's that about? She's trying to claim that what?
That Mel B defamed her by saying she had an abortion, that she had sex tapes, that she took Mel B's personal property. All of those type of things are tied up in the defamation suit. The judge has cleared that to go for trial, saying that Mel B did not have any immunity or free speech rights.
Good. Well, that's exciting about Mel B. We're going to talk a little bit more about Katy Perry. We're going to talk about some potholes when we come back. We got about 15 seconds left. We're going to talk about Carmax and the Ford Motor Company case. Do they have to disclose defects in cars when they sell used cars? And we're going to discuss that right after this.
You're listening to RadioLawTalk.com. And now back to your host, Frederick Penny.
Carmax is faced a jury for allegedly not disclosing pickup defects. In October 2016, approximately, a lawsuit came forth. There's a man by the name of Santos that goes to Carmax and buys a 2002 Ford F-150. Now, let me tell you, that's why my dad told me to become a lawyer. Because a 2002 Ford F-150 on the low end is worth $8,000. One of the better, nicer ones is going to be worth $15,000. Think of all the lawyers lined up. So what happens is this vehicle has a defect in it, and somehow there's some sort of defect that causes a spark that can cause a fire in the truck, and I'll get to the details of that in a second. But anyway, Carmax comes out. When you buy a car from Carmax, what do they say? They say it's what? It's not guaranteed, but it is certified, correct?
Yes.
So it's certified. Basically, the question is whether or not, is it reasonable for you to understand that everything's okay when they say it's certified?
It's certified as a used vehicle.
That's true, but they certify it that it's in good condition, basically.
Yes. And
so the issue becomes, this Santos buys this truck. A few years later, he parks it in his garage, and the defective speed control deactivation switch catches fire, and it burns down his house and his barn. So you think, oh, why are they suing over a $8,000 to $15,000 car? Well, it was over $100,000. It was actually $267,000
because it involved both the personal property and the real property.
Correct,
damage.
But still, knowing what we know as lawyers, $200,000 and suing Ford and Carmax, and who was suing, believe it or not, was Santos, but it was through his insurance company. And his insurance company was First American Specialty Insurance Company that was sued Carmax and Ford. Apparently Ford settles, gets out, but then a motion for summary judgment is filed, and which was denied by Carmax West as to whether or not they are required, that is, whether or not Carmax is required to put them on notice of any defects that are or recalls. So that issue did come before the California legislature. They considered it, but ultimately did not pass a bill that would have required used car dealerships to obtain, quote, recall database reports and report those prior to advertising a vehicle as certified. And then, but that never passed. It was AB 287. I don't know all the laws in every single state, but you have to look at your state to determine. But the question is whether or not a used car dealership or someone that has used car that should be able to or should tell the buyer if this is a certified car. Now, that doesn't say if they don't claim it's certified. They just said if they claim it's certified, whether or not they should tell them about any defects or recalls from the past. But, Todd, you said that you bought a used car one time, and then you still got the notification from Ford.
I did. I bought a Ford, and I bought it from Carmax. And I think I bought it in like 2011, 2012, somewhere along in there. And after I purchased the car, I mean, within a couple of months, I was getting notices directly from Ford about recall. I think there was one about the brakes, and then there was one about the airbag. And I was getting these recall notices coming directly from Ford because Carmax informed Ford that I was now an owner of a Ford vehicle. Or somehow Ford was informed of that. So I was getting the notification. And just really quickly, while you were talking there, Fred, I was looking for what Carmax's inspection list is. They advertise this 125-point inspection. And it gets a little bit of grief from Consumer Reports because part of the things on the inspection are headlights work, seats recline. They include a lot of things, so they can say 125. Nothing, yeah. But interesting to note, this is a separate case, but in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, an individual named Travis Gonzalez filed a claim against Carmax, and the Federal Appeals Court said that Carmax's 125-point inspection did not pass muster under California's requirement that a consumer be provided with a complete inspection report prior to purchase. So Gonzalez sued, saying that his car was defective. Carmax said, well, this is our 125-plus point inspection. And the appeals court said, that's nice, but that inspection list you just provided us does not meet the standards of the California law. And so if Carmax now is in this other case trying to claim the same thing, and we've already got one court that says it doesn't meet that, and this is a case that I just found about 10 minutes ago I'm looking at right now, that could be a real issue for Carmax if it doesn't pass muster. Now, like you said, Fred, the legislature has not included defect recalls as part of the inspection list.
Correct.
Well, this is going to be an issue about whether or not, regardless of whether the legislature has said it, if this is something that a person could reasonably rely on. I think this gets to...
Is it a standard, or is it a duty of care that they owe to their peersons to do this, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Because they sued. First, the statute of limitations came up, right? And the personal property they might have lost on that because they had to file within a year.
I think it's 3 years. So
it's 3 years for real property, but not personal. Personal's less. And so then they also sued on the theory of negligence. And First American would have to show that the defendants owed a duty to the insured, breached the duty, and that the breach caused harm to First American.
But yeah, go ahead.
And then they also sued on the grounds of duty to inform.
Right. Misrepresentation, I think, is their best argument. Did they misrepresent them? I think that's gonna be the only thing that I think they're gonna have a possibility of winning on.
Because they have this 125-point inspection. Does that misrepresent the fact that it's a safe car?
Right, because misrepresentation, you have to show that they asserted a material fact which was untrue, without reasonable grounds, with the intent that someone would rely on it, and that the person, in this case, would have justifiably relied on it, and as a result was harmed, which obviously... he, quote, wasn't harmed, but the insurance company steps in on their behalf.
We're coming up on the bottom of the hour, Fred, so we're going to have to take a break. Are we keeping with this through the bottom of the hour? Because I got a question I want to ask you about Ford's settlement and how that might impact.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a little bit, but if you want to call us or have any questions, tweet us or call us. Go ahead, Denise.
Yeah, call us at 855-529-7234. We would love to hear from you.
We'll be right back after the break.
You're listening to RadioLawTalk.com. And now back to your host, Frederick Penny.
Todd had a question about the Carmax case where we're going to discuss. Go ahead,
just
Todd.
Very generally, so if Ford has already settled,
correct,
and Carmax is still in the case, to what extent does the settlement with Ford impact the seeking damages against Carmax for what's been filed if they were joint defendants in this case?
Right. We talked about this during the break, but $267,000 is what they're claiming the damages. Let's say Ford settled for $100,000 or wants to settle for $100,000. Clearly, the issue is whether or not they're made whole, and that is the plaintiff is actually, would be basically Santos and First American, his insurance company, but they would get a credit for that, and it has to be agreed upon by the judge. They have to take that to the judge to settle. They can't just settle out nilly-willy. The judge has to approve that settle. Now, here's the interesting thing that I brought up before. And Denise brought up a good point, which would be, maybe they're going to argue we want more damages because they're going to call it something different. But here's the issue. We call it the empty chair issue, an empty chair problem. As a plaintiff's lawyer, I hate it. I don't like settling one person out or one company out, because now what are the other individuals going to do? What are the other defendants going to do?
They're saying it's the person that wasn't here.
That's exactly right. Okay, so say you settle for Ford for $100,000, whatever, but then guess who they're all gonna jump on? They're gonna jump on Ford. Carmax is gonna jump on Ford as at fault. But guess what happens when you have Ford and you have all the defendants involved? I'm telling my secrets here, but a lot of lawyers know this. When they're all involved, guess what Ford's gonna do as a defendant in that case? And guess what Carmax is going to do if they're not settled out? They're pointing at each other. So you're sitting there as a plaintiff's lawyer going, okay, this is the case, and here's our injuries, and here's the problem, and they're just pounding on each other. But if one steps out, that empty chair's sitting there, and they're all pounding on that empty chair that's gone. So for me as a plaintiff's lawyer, and again, I don't have all the details on this case, but I'm a little worried when I let a defendant out of a case.
Similar thing what happens in criminal law. When I was a DA, we'd prosecute, say, co-defendants for a joint theft of a liquor store or something like that. You never settled the case. If you made an offer to resolve, it was always a package deal. You either both take it or there's no deal. And the reason why is if you settle with the first defendant, and let's say the first defendant has something kind of lighter, you settle with that person and then try to go to trial against the second defendant. The second defendant's going to point to the first one that you already settled with and say, it was all them. And juries, well, you already got one guy, and so it's you either wrap it up with both of them or you don't wrap it up with any of them.
Yeah, and in this case, one of the reasons why we talk about what we're going to bring up, what topics we're bringing up on Radio Law Talk before we roll in. And this one we talked about, and I kind of chose this one for one reason. It's interesting to me to see the amount of litigation going on for really, when I first saw it, I said, oh my gosh, an $8,000 truck, and they probably spent hundreds of thousands in attorney's fees. But still, for $200,000, they've spent over $200,000 in attorney's fees here. But it tells you it's the people with the money. Ford, Carmax, the insurance company, they got the money to spend that.
Right.
Oh, and I think we're going to be talking about a case here pretty quickly where the attorney's fees in that case make the attorney's fees in this case look like chump change.
Yeah, that's the Katy Perry.
That's the Perry one coming up.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about that. But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about the farmers' battle. There's the issue of the farmers' union case, and Denise
Farm
workers union
case.
Go ahead, let's go through that. You guys go ahead. I don't want to talk the whole time. Let's roll a little bit about and talk about Monday, November 27, 2017. California ruled to allow a state to impose labor contracts for farm workers whose union employees don't agree on wages on their working conditions. So that's interesting.
You've got a situation where the farmers' employers are negotiating with the farm workers union, and there's kind of contracts out there, but they're not being finalized. The final terms are just not being agreed to, and it's taking so much time, and these farm workers are exposed somewhat because they really don't know what their true compensation is going to be. And so it's my understanding that there is a mandatory mediation conciliation regulations act, and
Denise, can you say that 5 times really fast?
No. No, and that act requires, if the union and the employer farmers do not come to an agreement within a certain period of time, that they are forced to go into mediation, and they have to come up with an agreement, or it's going to be what the union has put out.
Right. So basically, the union has the power to. They retain the power. If they're still negotiating stuff, they could still keep this thing rolling. And hey, this is what we're doing, while they're still negotiating. Right.
And this is Cesar Chavez is a very important figure in our Sacramento area culture, and he was really instrumental in getting the unions for farm workers, and even had an impact on this act that was started. I think it was in 2002.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Good.
But they say this is not violating the state constitution. That was the issue. Is this violating the state constitution? They said it is not. That was the argument. The defendant is called Gerwin Farms.
Yes.
I don't know who Gerwin Farms are, but that's the defendant in this case.
Well, one of the issues in this is that there has to be something that precludes the farmer or the employer from dragging this out in protracted negotiations, that if they did that, it does leave the workers without the finality of knowing what their wages are going to be. And it could be a tactic on the part of an employer to go ahead and drag this out to see if some people will, if you have protracted union negotiations, the hope from an employer might be that the employees get fed up with the union and are ready to take whatever lowball offer the employer wants to offer at that point in time, and they're just sort of taking advantage of the fact that this goes on and on. And these laws, the California, the Agricultural Labor Relations Act, and as well as the National Labor Relations Act, are all passed in an effort to give employees greater strength when it comes to collective bargaining with their employers. And so that's kind of how they've approached it.
So Garrowin farming, they have a nectarine, peach, and plum farm in Central Valley of California.
Yeah, 1990, actually, a little bit of history. The UFW, which is the union, won the right to represent the Gerwin farm workers. Yeah, and that was a 1990 case. But some interesting information. Just I like the FYI stuff. Americans spend 10% of their income on food. Did you know that? 10% of your income is spent on food. Me, it was about 90% prior to losing my weight. So now it's about 10%. Actually, it's probably 10% because it was 10% then because I'm using all those really weird stuff. But I think I'm gonna shoot for the 10%.
I know every time I go on a diet, the stock price of McDonald's drops.
That's exactly right.
Because like, oh my gosh, our major.
Well, we have the lowest percentage of income being spent on food than any other developed country.
Right.
Quite honestly, we have very low cost food here because we produce most of our food, or at least much of our food, here in the United States.
Right. And where we are, we're sitting in California right now, but there's a lot of farming in California. Farming employs more than 24 million workers in America. That's 17% of the total workforce.
Wow.
That's huge. That is absolutely huge. So farmers, and we like farmers here. I know we do not get political here. Radio Law Talk, when you're tired of politics radio, turn into Radio Law Talk. But we like our vets and we like our farmers. But it comes down to, that's a huge workforce. So this issue in this case in California is a big issue because it applies to a lot of people.
It does, and it applies to the farm workers. Typically could be taken advantage of by the big farming companies, and I think that's why it's so important that they are represented by the union.
Hey, something funny. So when we do our work on these cases, we do our research. And since Cal's not here, we've got the Smith. They're not brothers, by the way. They're friends. No, everyone thought I thought they were brothers. Oh. So Brad and Jeff Smith are not brothers. But so I don't want to put too much on them because we make them do like little tidbits here and there. But there is the funniest picture of, what is the guy the beer that he's the man?
It's the most interesting man in the world.
Okay, this is what it says. It shows the most interesting man in the world, and it says, "I don't always attend union meetings, but when I do, I prefer to get drunk beforehand."
Stay thirsty, my friends.
So there we go. There's before you go to a union meeting, you want to get drunk. But all right, so that's some interesting things about what's going on with the farm workers and unions. We're going to talk next. We're out of here in about 15 seconds, but we're going to talk next a little bit about potholes. But the next hour, we want to talk about this big Katy Perry case and the Archdiocese and the Catholic Church and this fraud that occurred, or possibly fraud that occurred. And we'll be back after this with Denise, Fred, and Todd.
You're listening to RadioLawTalk.com. And now back to your host, Frederick Penny.
Remember, we're only talking about general law. If you need any answers to your legal questions, seek a local lawyer in your area that handles that type of a law. Remember, we're California lawyers here. I am Washington, D.C. lawyer also. I am Fred Penny with Todd Cunin and Denise Sturks. We were talking during the break about some interesting parts of the law, including Denise. And I said I want to bring this up next hour, and I probably will, but I kind of think we need to bring this up. We need to say it. What is going on? We bring up the latest topics of the law. We're about ready to talk about potholes. What's between you and I? That's kind of boring. I'm gonna take 30 seconds on the pothole issue, just so you know. But it's important. People are driving out there with hitting potholes. I want to tell you that if you go back to one of our podcasts, I don't remember the date. Just go to Radio Law Talk. go to podcasts, and it lists what the topics are, and it'll say potholes. Go click on that time period and listen to the pothole segment where we talk about where you can go to make a claim for a pothole, what the issues are, what the laws are, and it's a long, detailed.
When you say pothole, you're talking about the
not
pothole,
Cal,
not Cal's dispensary.
No, not
okay,
Cal. Where he is right now. Seth, I hope Seth is listening. I think Seth's in there somewhere, but maybe he stepped out. But Seth is going to find us. He's still trying to find us a picture of Cal, what he's really doing today, because he claims he's Santa in a play, but I truly think he's in Shasta County hanging out at a pot dispensary drive-through. I think he runs the
certainly hope
drive-through.
whatever picture Seth is able to find, it is nothing like the
Have you found that picture?
pictures he has allegedly found of me.
Have you found that picture yet? So you start working harder. We've got to find that picture of Cal. So our investigator, I'm going to call our investigator because I did talk to him earlier, and I'm going to keep working on that. So the next hour, we're going to have a picture of Cal.
So potholes in California, there is a way, a mechanism, a procedure, if you will, to be able to recover for damage to your car. If it's a street or a road or something that's being maintained by California,
that's exactly
Caltrans.
right. You have to make a claim, and this is a case we're going to talk about a pothole. A lady stepped out of a transit. I can't remember if it was a bus or
she was riding on a bus.
On a bus, stepped in the pothole. There's these issues. They didn't argue that it was the pothole because there's all these government regulations and government protections to step in a pothole.
This was in Philadelphia.
That's exactly right. But here's what they're claiming, and then this is the reason I brought this up, without getting into the boring details of pothole law, is. This is how innovative some lawyers are. Trying to get around the laws and the rules, they stepped in and she said the pothole didn't cause her injury. It was the brick underneath the pothole that caused her the injury. And
yeah,
therefore,
down in the pothole.
Yeah, down on the pothole. So I was going to talk briefly about that, but if you want to go back and look at our segment on potholes, we even have where you can go on the government site to claim
to make your claim.
Yeah,
yes.
but here's the issue. The issue is, like I said, go pay for it yourself. By the time you spend all the time making the claims, going through the process, it's going to cost you more money than the $120 it costs you to replace your rim. I mean, unless you're driving a new Ferrari, your rim's going to cost you $150. You're going to spend more than $150 of time trying to get reimbursed for that pothole bend in your rim, because I've had my rims bent before in my car. But anyway, that's kind of what I was going to talk about. But that's so boring. But I want to talk about the elephant in the room. And you brought up the elephant in the room. Here on Radio Law Talk, we slide all over the place, Denise, and you know that. So anyway. Yes. That's going to slide right into our topic. Our topic is, Denise, tell us what one of your listeners and actually not a friend, a listener talked to you about.
Yeah, a listener. She asked when we were going to address sexual harassment, and I responded that we have intentions to do so. Right now, if they're kind of in a separate segments, if you will. You have sexual harassment in the workplace. You have sexual harassment as an independent contractor. You have sexual harassment
in the government.
Yeah, or Uber. You hire an Uber driver, and that's happened there. Or you have sexual harassment in the legislature or in the government and different agencies. And so, what can happen as a result of an allegation of sexual harassment is different depending on the setting.
And it is blowing up, and including, like we've talked about the Bill Cosby trial, that they're talking about sexual harassment that occurred how long ago? 25 years ago? How does the statute not run? We brought that up before. Actually, I think you can go back to one of our podcasts about Bill Cosby. But that is a hot topic that we talk about, the latest hot topics of the law. We're not touching that yet because, as we've talked about, it's so fluid right now. We'll probably talk about, and plus Rodriguez isn't here, and he's the key. We need him here to talk about it because he's the weirdest guy in the world, and we're gonna find out how he's done it in his life, and then we're gonna use him as an example. And Cal, the best part about it, our new guys, they don't know where to press the button. It's the eject button. So Cal knows where the eject button is. So that's when we're going to talk about the sexual harassment stuff.
We will cover this coming up soon. But right now we feel like it needs to ripen a little more so that we can better deal with it apolitically.
That's exactly right. So we talk about potholes instead, which is kind of boring. But that's basically,
Well, this Philadelphia case is interesting because the law is interesting. The law required the person to give notice of the pothole before they could sue for damages.
Yes, but let's be clear that every state is different on their laws concerning the government entities. Usually you have 6 months. This is general law. This is like California general law. This is Todd's over there going,
food goes in here.
Food goes. Everybody at that was like pothole law. So, but anyway, you got 6 months. Usually it's a 6 month statute. Every state you got to look. You got to talk to a lawyer locally. Believe me, call a lawyer up and say you need some help with your pothole law issue, and they're going to go, huh? I charge $250 an hour. What do you want? So go ahead, Denise. It's different.
Well, it's involved in sovereign immunity, the state's sovereign immunity, and whether or not there's an exception to the sovereign immunity. And in this particular case, there would have been notice given of this pothole to have gotten into the exception under this Philadelphia law.
But they're trying to say the kind of the exception is it has nothing to do with the pothole, it has to do with the brick on the bottom of the pothole.
They were trying to get around the notice provision for sure.
Who has to give notice of the pothole?
The plaintiff.
The plaintiff has to give notice of the pothole,
or I don't know
before they're injured, which seems
which would nullify the fact that you got injured, because if you knew about the pothole, why'd you step in it?
I don't know. I don't know the law there. It's all different, but it's stupid. The reason, and I don't know if that's the case, Denise. I'm not sure. The reason I brought this whole issue up, why are you talking about potholes? You don't know the law. I'm bringing it up because we talked about it in California law, which I understand, which my point was, don't waste your time. It's going to cost you more time, energy, and effort to get something replaced on your car when you hit a pothole, because we're talking more about the property damage rather than stepping in a pothole and injuries. I always say it's so hard to sue a government entity that lawyers do it all the time. We do it all the time too. Believe me, we do it. But the exceptions that you have to get around, the immunities of the government are high. And it's very difficult. It's like suing the Indian gaming companies, because Indian reservation, they're supposedly their own country, basically. And it's more difficult to sue those people than a normal person or a normal company in the United States. So that's all I wanted to bring it up for. Anything else about potholes you want to talk about, guys, that's exciting and interesting?
2 potholes walk into a bar.
Go ahead. I'm going to hear about it.
I don't know.
No, but I've seen potholes where there are people that can stand inside the pothole, that they're that big. So, potholes come in different sizes. And it just seems to me that if you are harmed by a pothole, that it doesn't make sense that you can give notice to the government or to the entity, the department, that you're supposed to prior to being injured.
I mean, it's like saying, this thing's going to hurt me. It's going to hurt me. This thing is going to hurt me.
Here you go. Ready?
And then you get hurt.
Here you go. Ready? New type of area of law. Guys always roll in, and gals. Fred, what kind of area of law should I... Pothole law.
Pothole law, yes.
What's your specialty? Pothole law. I handle pothole law.
Now, we want to thank Olivia Scott from Pepperdine University
You notice
School
she just
of Law.
throws us right off and goes right into the important parts? Go ahead, Denise.
Yes, I
That's
think we
why
have to get in.
She does.
Because Olivia Scott from Pepperdine University School of Law has done our research today, and it's our topic that we picked.
All right, we're going to be right back, the third hour, to talk more about Katy Perry. I'm Fred Penny, this is Denise, and this is Todd. We'll be right back. Radio Law Talk.
You have been listening to RadioLawTalk.com, a copyrighted presentation of Radio Law Talk Incorporated.